Listeners, how do you keep the faith when your nervous system is fried, your heart is tired, and the world feels like too much? Is this a question you've wrestled with, or are you dealing with it right now? If so, this episode is for you. In today's Editors Roundtable, I'm joined by Kristen Sancken and Lynn Shattuck to talk about what actually helps when times are tough. During this episode, we share our very personal experiences of losing our faith in our creative projects and even in ourselves, how a focus on products versus process can take a toll on our worthiness, and the strategies we've used to be gentle with ourselves as we live through difficult seasons and work to make sense of them. This is a conversation about understanding the season you're in, connecting with community, and choosing care in a culture that tells us we have to go it alone. Let's get started. Welcome to Writing Resilience, the podcast for writers who want to write and live the story that sets them free. I'm your host, Lisa Cooper Ellison, a writer, transformational and trauma-informed coach, story alchemist, and fellow traveler on the winding road of healing and creativity. Each week, I'll share tools, practices, and conversations that will help you let go of what no longer serves you as you create stories that change lives, especially your own. Together, we'll explore how to trust your creative voice, support your mental health and resilience, work with your nervous system and unique design, and stay connected to your deepest calling as a writer, even when life gets messy. It's time, my friends, to write and live the story that sets you free. I'm honored to walk that journey alongside you, one story and one episode at a time. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Writing and Resilience podcast. My name is Lisa Cooper Ellison. I am your resident story alchemist, and I am here today with Kristen Sancken and Lynn Shattuck to talk about, it felt like the theme of 2025 that is bleeding into 2026, and that is, how do you keep the faith, right? How do you do that, especially when life is tough and it doesn't look like that difficulty has an end in sight? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to share some personal experiences of what we experienced when we were in the middle of what I call the Empire Strikes Back of life. So if you're not familiar with that movie series, The Empire Strikes Back is the second of 3 movies in the Star Wars trilogy. I am a Star Wars buff. I love it. But in the Star Wars series, so there's part 1, and it's basically these rebels against the Empire. And at the end of the first movie, the rebels seem to win, right? They blow up this Death Star, and it seems like everything's going to be okay, except the main bad guy, Darth Vader. He survives this, and he goes on to wreak more havoc. In the second movie, the Empire wins. And then it seems like all hope is lost by the end of the movie. Nothing good can happen, right? The Empire is stronger and the rebels are weak. But then we get to the third movie, which is Return of the Jedi, and everything ends up working out. Though, of course, there are battles and struggles along the way. So that's kind of a framework for thinking about where we are in life, right? We are, for many of us, in the Empire Strikes Back, that period where whatever your representation of the Empire is, the thing that feels insurmountable feels like it's winning. And you have to figure out, how am I going to keep the faith in the middle of that? So let's go ahead and get started. And I don't know if Lynn or Kristen, you'd like to begin by sharing a story that you have about keeping the faith.
One of the things when we discussed this topic for a podcast, I disclosed to everyone, like, I'm in the middle of multiple family crises right now. And most, if not all, of my writing projects are on the back burner because I really have to focus on caregiving for my kids, caregiving for my father. And when I graduated 2 years ago with my doctorate in writing, over the last 2 years, it's been really painful to watch all of my colleagues begin to publish their dissertations, begin to get book deals, while I am just slogging through edits at like this sloth-like pace, because the only time I have for edits is like the 1 hour on a Saturday or whatever that I can get to myself. And so I'm really struggling to see myself as a writer some days, and as someone with something important to say. I feel pretty overwhelmed by the daily needs of people who rely on me, and it's really hard to keep that faith that like I was meant to write this book when you're just on a daily basis in survival mode. And so I want to say like, and then it ended all well, but like I'm in the middle of it right now. So I'm trying to keep the faith and be like, it will end. And I don't know what that ending is going to look like or how that may change my life, but to keep the faith and to be like, something's going to be different.
Thank you for sharing that, Kristen. My heart is going out to you because, yeah, that is the hardest place to be, in the middle of the mess. And sometimes when I'm thinking about this, I will think about it in terms of a ravine, right? What we would all love to do is be able to be on the top of the plateau and somehow leap over the ravine versus having to climb down and then climb back up. But that low point where we are in the ravine, looking up, that sky above can seem so far away. And the way to that top of the plateau can feel impossible. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm curious, Lynn, when you think about your own life and where you are in your writing projects, what's that story for you?
The time that I can relate to that is a couple years ago. So like April 2024. And I felt like I was on this series of trials. Bizarre things kept happening. We had a couple storms that knocked our power out for 3 days. My daughter and I got lice when I thought like we were well beyond the lice stage. And during that time, I also was working on the memoir that I've been wanting to write for basically like 25 years. And I got to a place where I had to put it aside because my nervous system, it was too much. It wasn't working. I was like re-traumatizing myself. And it was a really hard decision, but I decided that it was time to put that aside. And, I had other projects that I was working on too, which was helpful, that were meaningful to me. And I didn't know, our lives only make sense really in reverse, right? When you get to the end and you know how everything came out. But when you're in that messy middle, it's so uncomfortable. And then just recently, I've surprisingly kind of returned to that project that I left off. When I look back at where I was with that project at the time, I've learned so much more about how to actually write a memoir. So whether that project ever comes to completion in the way that I'd like it to or not, the process over the product is kind of where I came to. We live in a capitalist society, and so we value the product, but writing isn't a product. It's an art. It's a way of life, really.
I love that. And what it makes me think about is how much we conflate our products with who we are, right? When we can hold a book in our hands, that means we are valuable, right? So we become the product, but we forget that the journey is what's important, right? So that's the piece that we need to hold on to. And oh my goodness, some of those journeys can be so rough. And so I'm going to share two journeys that intersected for me around this issue of being in that dark night of the soul. When I was young, my brother died by suicide, and then I went back to school. And while I was in school, it became very clear I wanted to be a writer. I'd always wanted that, but I started to pursue that, and I pursued it seriously. And I graduated with my bachelor's. Then I decided to take 2 years to work on a portfolio. At that time, I was working as a poet. And so that was what I was going to go to school for, which of course we all know makes lots and lots of money, right? But I was just passionate about poetry. I wrote it all the time, and I really wanted to be a poet, and I wanted to teach writing to other poets. So that was my goal. And I applied to all of these different programs across the country. I got waitlisted in one place, and then another place accepted me and gave me a full ride. So that's supposed to be that point where you're cheering for yourself, like, yeah, I did it. And inside, my nervous system was like, holy cow, this is terrible. And I was really struggling with, is this what I want to do? Because I would have to leave everything that I knew and travel across the country to live in this very small rural community where I would get my MFA. And there was just something inside me that was tearing me apart. And of course, because my mind said, well, of course you have to say yes. Look, it's the thing you've wanted. This is what you should do. So I said yes. And then I spent a week of sleepless nights and my stomach roiling. And I just didn't even feel like I could survive like this internal turmoil. So I call back and I say no, knowing that I may have disappointed them, but not expecting to actually be yelled at by the director of this program about how I had ruined chances for other people. And he just said a bunch of things that hit me really hard. And to be fair to this person, maybe he didn't say them in as harsh of a tone as I took it in, but maybe he did. It's hard to say, like looking back, because I don't have a recording. But what I can say is that I was devastated. And I felt like the smallest of the small, right? I felt like I was smaller than an ant. And I definitely told myself that I don't deserve to be a writer, right? It doesn't even matter what I want. I don't deserve this because look at how much I've screwed things up. So I quit writing for about 4 years. I just told myself, I've blown my shot. I will never be a writer in the sense that I was thinking in my mind, and I will never teach writing. So I just went along with life and got another degree. I got a master's in teaching. I taught for a while, and I would write on the side because the call never left me. But I was like, it's like, more hobby level stuff. And then I ended up getting a master's in counseling. And then lo and behold, I end up getting Lyme disease. And I am so sick. I'm in a second dark night of the soul, and it feels unbearable. And every day I would look at this blue Buddha that I had on my shelf, and I would just say, in 5 years, this will all be different. That was my mantra. And then I would go for a walk and I would say this to myself again and again and again. And I was hoping that the more I said this and the more I set deadlines for getting well, that I would suddenly get well and it would all make sense. That didn't happen. Years went by. And there was this one day when I was walking on this trail and I see this red-winged blackbird and I see this bluebird, which were two birds that were very important to me. And I realized the first step to getting well, and then of course getting my life back on track because I wasn't working, was to give up. And I gave up trying to get well and realized I might die in this place where my body feels incredibly miserable. And I had to be okay with that. So I want to be clear, this was not me feeling suicidal. It was me giving up this expectation that I would be well and that getting well would make my life better. I had to be okay with my life as it was. And that became the practice. And as I did that, it was like a key unlocked this door for me. And then so many things changed in my life. And of course, now I'm on this podcast and I talk about writing all the time and I teach writing. And so when I was in the middle of it, just like the two of you, there was no way I could imagine that this is where I would be. Not in a million years. I thought that my life was over at certain points in these journeys and that it would never, ever, ever get better. But I can say that it is different now. And I can look back and see how each of these moments was necessary. And it was necessary to confront them exactly as they were. And that's really nice and easy for me to say, looking back on that. But what's more important, especially listeners, if you're in the middle of this messy period in your life, this Empire Strikes Back, dark night of the soul, what do you do with it? How do you maintain the faith that things could be okay in some fashion when it doesn't look like it? So let's talk about the strategies that we have used to get to where we are, because even when you give up or you gave up in the past, let's say, if you're still here, there's a part of you that's still fighting that battle and you are still moving forward. You are still a tenacious person who is persevering. And even when it feels like there's no faith, as long as you're here on this earth, you got a little, even if it is only the faith that would fit in a grain of rice, you have something. So what'd y'all do, or what are you doing right now to keep the faith?
I actually learned this from another writer who has children, and she started doing this because she had a spouse that worked full-time out of the home, and then she was at home with the kids during the day. I don't think she created this. I think she found it out from another writer, and she calls it Dadder Days. So it's basically allowing Saturday to have your spouse be completely in control of the household, and you leave the house for the day. So I just go to the library, and I have like a favorite chair in the library, and I always tell myself, if I ever get published, I'm going to get a plaque to put on that chair to be like, this was the chair that inspired this book in this local library. And I sit there all day, and maybe I like leave to get a sandwich and come back. But it gives me the time that I need in these heavy, heavy caretaking times where, like, I have a child that's autistic that, has pretty high needs, and my dad has Alzheimer's. There's a lot of people in my life right now who need my presence, and to prioritize my own presence with myself and to lean on the people who do want to give me that. So my husband wants me to be happy. He doesn't want me to be resentful of all the caretaking that's required. And so he's happy to step in and do dadder days and be with the kids for the day. And it's really the only way I was able to complete my dissertation was to like set aside every Saturday for 3 years as my writing time, because I am the type of person who needs deep work. I can't write in 15-minute chunks. I know some people can like do it, while the kid's on the soccer field or while you're taking the subway to work. I need to wrap my whole head around what we're doing. I need like at least 2 to 3 hours. And so I just wasn't getting much done. And I was so frustrated with myself that I was like, why can't I create the great American novel in the 20 minutes I have to myself every day? And then just realizing like that's actually a ridiculous expectation. And so to really chunk out and say like, all right, this is when I'm going to do what I need to do. And I think the other thing that really helps me keep the faith, especially when working on a big project like a book, is to publish something small. Put out a blog post, a Substack, submit a poem to a local literary journal, do something that helps you just be able to name, I am a writer, and here's a piece that proves it. Any of us who've worked on a book know it takes years, right? Even if you're like a really successful book writer, it's at least 2 years. But for me, it's been 8 years or 9 years or 10 years, depending on the book. And it can be really discouraging to keep going after 10 years with no external feedback or with very little external feedback. So to publish something small every now and then, just to remind myself, like, I am a writer and people do like what I have to say. And I do have a unique way of viewing the world. That really helps me stay with part of my brain in the writing world, both the time to write and the ability to stay connected to writing communities through publishing.
I love that. I love this idea of dadder days. So, listeners, if you are a parent of small children, this could be a great opportunity for you to carve out some time for yourself. And yeah, focusing on those small wins and giving yourself an opportunity to experience them is super helpful. So, Lynn, what about you?
I think some of it for me, some of the struggle was about worthiness to write this memoir that I had been wanting to write forever. I let go of some paid work. I really made some intentional life choices around that. And so to get to a point where I felt like it was time to shelve it was kind of like a reckoning with worthiness. Like, am I worth that time of writing if nothing comes from it? And inherent in that is some privilege that I acknowledge. Not everybody has the time and space and resources to do that. I guess what I had to reckon with was, if this project never goes anywhere, is there still worth in it? And for me, there was, because writing is how I make meaning of things. It's how I survive when things are hard. It's really a lifeline for me. And that even if nobody else ever saw those pages, that I was still worth the time it took to write them. And the other thing, I took up crocheting around the same time that this was all going on. And it was the first place in my life where I would be working on something for a while and then it wasn't going the way I wanted it to. And I would just pull the yarn out. And it was like, whoa, you can just start over. As a perfectionist, that was really like a revelation. So I started to think, can writing be like that too? Like, why does it have to be this aim for a finished project constantly? Like this concrete, yes, we have books on our shelves, and that's what most of us as writers want to have, is that product. But what you don't see in the product is like sometimes years of playing around and unspooling the yarn and starting over again.
And sometimes it's really helpful too. I'm glad you mentioned that. Sometimes reading other memoirs gets you through. I think that's what I rely a lot on. It's, when my child was first diagnosed with autism, I think I read 6 autism memoirs just to try to understand, what are they experiencing? What am I experiencing? What does this look like over the long term? It just gives you more of a frame of reference, and you're less alone, right? Like, that feeling of aloneness can be so hard when you're in the middle of crisis. Like, no one understands what this is like. But then to read like, oh no, someone does. Like, to me, that's the beauty of literature, right? And I think it was James Baldwin who said, the beautiful thing about books is that you read and you say, oh, you too? I thought I was the only one. And so sometimes being a part of that literature community, reading what other people have written about the same thing you've gone through, can be inspiring and can help you feel less lonely and can really help you stay connected to the faith. And like you said, to read what other writers have done and to realize like, oh, lots of people have struggled with this. It's actually a very common experience to write a book and then be like, oh, this is total bull twalky, right? Like this, and then to have to go back and rewrite the whole thing. That's actually happened to every writer, and that you're not alone. And yeah, that's a part of the process as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that is one of the reasons why I interview authors is because they all have a publication journey. They all have a story to tell. And I don't even know how many authors I have interviewed at this point, but every single one talked about the struggle they faced as they were working on their book and those points when they were like, I didn't know if it was going to be a book, or it took me 10, 20, 40 years to get this story out and get it right. So, yeah, the more you can not just read the books that can inspire you, but listen to podcast episodes or read interviews with your favorite authors, it normalizes the experience. Right. It normalizes the experience of how long it takes, the struggles we have, because often when we see a published book, all we see is the success. We don't see the struggle behind it and also the play. Right. So I'm so glad you brought that up, Lynn, that concept of play and how playing around with your story is the fun. Because once you finish it, you have to say goodbye to it. Right. And what if this is the only book you choose to write? Some of you will only write one book. Some of you will write many books, and some of you may not write a book at all because that's not the journey you want to be on. So, what do you want that process to look like? Do you want it to be filled with some ease or hope or play? Or do you want it to constantly be a battle? Because sometimes it may still feel like a battle, right? That part you may not be able to control, but what can you control in the process? That's the piece that is really important to understand. And when I think about my own struggle through both of those, when I think back on, first quitting, right? Quitting writing and telling myself you're not good enough. It really was that story of worthiness, just like it was for you, Lynn. Like, who am I and what do I deserve to do? Especially if I quote unquote screw up, right? Because that's what I told myself. I screwed up, which meant I had failed and therefore I was a failure. So for me, step one is understanding the story that you're telling yourself. And sometimes if you are deep in that, you don't have the bandwidth to do that retrospective exploration. You can't reflect because you're just feeling. So if that is you, listeners, and you're in the middle of it, just allow yourself to feel. And as you're allowing yourself to feel, try to pay attention to your feet and the ground beneath your feet. Let that be the first aspect of faith that you have, because the miracle of gravity is you may not understand it. You may not know how to calculate it, but guess what? Your feet are on the ground. It is happening. And so when I think about both of those times, walking and when I was younger, running played a huge part of just letting my feet move one in front of the other. It helped me make some sort of progress towards something, even if it was the finish line of that run. So think about how you can use movement to help yourself. And then the other piece that was really important to me, because I did all of these walks in nature, was that nature can be this teacher for you. It can teach you about faith. And some things that nature taught me along the way was, one, there are seasons. And sometimes we have seasons of rest, right? And that can be seasons of rest for our projects. And sometimes we have seasons of work. And sometimes that season of work or caregiving doesn't always line up with what you hope it will be, right? It can be something completely different. And when we can just allow that, if you're in a season of motherhood, especially if that's a season of caregiving with small children or high needs children, that may be where your focus is for that period of time. Right. But that season will eventually end and you will be in a different season. And I saw that over those years that I walked that same path with those bluebirds and those red-winged blackbirds, because the season was constantly changing. The other thing that I learned along that way is to ask for signs. You don't have to have a specific spiritual practice to ask for signs, but you can ask for something good and you can look for it, or ask for something that just helps you feel okay with where you are. And every time I would see the bluebird, which is now my spirit animal, that would help me feel okay. And it's really wild because where I live, my actual neighborhood, I am surrounded by bluebirds. I actually had some bluebirds that ended up nesting in this little rafter on my back porch. So just ask for that. And this is a piece of wisdom that I'm sharing with you now that I just recently heard, but it hit me really hard and it made me think back to that time. And that is that nature never rushes. Nature moves at the organic speed it is supposed to move, and it does not move any faster. And yet we progress through the seasons. the seeds open and the flower blooms and the tree gets filled with leaves, and then those leaves fall off, but it does so at the pace it's supposed to. And so, when you're thinking about your situation, whatever that is, whether it's related to a book that you're writing or some other project or just life in general, the more you can find a mantra that helps you ground into that experience, the deeper that experience is going to be. So, just saying nature doesn't hurry and neither do I. Nature doesn't have to rush and neither do I. That's a very simple thing that you can say to yourself. You can also borrow the mantra that I shared before, which is in 5 years, it will be different and I will understand something about this. Who knows what that thing is that you're going to understand, right? There's no attachment to it, but simply saying that can help you ground into the moment and recognize that it's okay, right? Your moment is okay, whatever it is. The last thing that I'm going to share, and it's kind of a funny thing, and then I'm going to pass it to the two of you for a final word, is what's called an egg laying breath. I have been doing this with so many people over the past 2 weeks, and it is really transformational. And that is because one of the ways to be grounded is to ground in your root, and that is the lowest part of your abdomen. We often have very little connection to that in our lives. And this particular breath is going to teach you how to do it. So I'm going to share it right now, and then you can try it on your own. So basically, what you do is you're going to inhale. And then as you exhale, you're going to connect with what's called your perineum. And I'll put a link in the show notes as to what that is. But that is the muscles that you would contract or connect with for Kegel exercises, right? It is that space of tissue between your anus and whatever your genitals are based on your sex. And so you're going to connect with that. And what you're going to do is try to make that smile. So if you think of nothing else other than smile perineum, smile perineum, smile perineum, or you think lay in that egg, and you're just thinking it and you're not doing anything else. And if you're not watching this on YouTube, everyone else is cracking up with this. Then yeah, just do that as you breathe. So inhaling, lay in the egg. And just do that with me one more time. Inhale, letting my perineum smile on the exhale. And it's fun, right? It's fun and it's funny. And that's a piece of lightness you can add to your day while you're also grounding yourself. And you're allowing your body to know you are here now in this space. And if you have enough bandwidth to talk about egg laying and think about it in your mind, something about your experience is safe right now. And maybe it's not safe all the time, but you can hold on to that safety of this moment. So that's one of my other strategies. What would the two of you like to say as we wrap up? And I'm going to pass the baton to you, Kristen, first.
Yeah, I like how you talked about the mantras, and I feel like I'm the child of two recovering alcoholics, and I spend a lot of time in 12-step meetings just coloring on the floor while they were discussing things. And so these slogans that are part of the 12 steps, I feel like have really become a part of my life. And the two that stick with me right now in this time of the messy middle are "This too shall pass." To remember that like nothing is permanent, and in the grand scheme of life and the universe, that this might be a remarkable period of your life, but it will likely be short. Kind of like what you were saying, Lisa, about like in 5 years, this is going to be different. So that's been a really helpful one for me to repeat to myself. The other one that's a pretty famous slogan from a 12-step group is "First things first." And for me, that means like if I'm looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what is the first thing I need to do? I need to focus on what's on the bottom of that pyramid. So I need to make sure I'm eating well, I'm sleeping well, I'm getting daily time outside, that I'm doing something to move my body that I enjoy. Like those are my first things first. If I can't do those things, then I can't expect myself to rise up the ladder of Maslow's hierarchy. I can't expect self-actualization. I can't expect meaning making. I can't expect everything that it requires to be a writer. And so to say first things first, I just need to stay right at this level. And if all I do today is make sure I eat 3 meals and get 8 hours of sleep and make sure my kids do the same, that's the first thing. Whereas writing is the 5th or 6th thing. Like that might be further down the list. And so this idea that yes, I can do hard things, but I don't have to do them all the time. And what I really need to do is the first thing.
That is so beautiful. Lynn, what about you?
Yeah, I have kind of 3 things that I'm thinking of. The first is just the reminder that writing memoir is really, really hard. It is really hard. It can take a long time. And I think there's good reason for that. The second is just looking at kind of our lives as cyclical. And I think especially as women, like that is kind of the nature. Our lives do go in these cycles, and there are cycles of caregiving and cycles of creativity and lots of cycles in between. And then the third thing is just thinking of writing as an act of devotion. This is something Lisa mentioned the other day, and it's just been like circling around, buzzing in my ear all week. Just the act of showing up over and over again, almost like going to church, right? Like you don't go to church and expect the outcome necessarily. You go up and you worship. And so to think of writing as that is like turning up to the page as an act of devotion, process over productivity again.
Yeah, I love that. First things first, focus on the process. Consider this as an act of devotion, right? So, what activities in your life are an act of devotion or an act of worship where the outcome isn't the point? It is simply to be with whatever is and to do whatever that task is. And recognize that wherever you are in 5 years, it will be different. And you will be able to see something about this time in your life or whatever struggles you've had before. And when you look back and you see the miraculous and the miracles that happened for you, even in the toughest of times, holding on to those miracles can be the thing that gets you through whatever you're going through now. So just know, writers, we've been there. We are still there, right? We are still going through this process because life is a process filled with cycles. And sometimes you're in the Return of the Jedi part of it and you're like in the victory, but sometimes you're in the Empire Strikes Back. And either way, it is all okay. So thank you for listening. And thank you, Kristen and Lynn, for sharing your insights and your wisdom with everyone. It has been a gift to spend time with you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you're struggling to keep the faith right now, please know that we see you and we are with you. And if you're looking for one simple thing that you can do to support yourself through a difficult time, crack open your journal and try these writing prompts. Today, the first thing I needed was write it down. And then if you haven't already done so, give it to yourself. Next, write about one small repeatable act that keeps you connected to your writing life or your creative self during heavy seasons. Where do you go? What do you do? What does this practice give you, even if nothing is produced? Share your thoughts in the comments because I would love to know how you're caring for yourself and how you're navigating any difficulties you are going through. And speaking of your thoughts on the podcast, I'd like to give a quick shout out to everyone on YouTube and Instagram who's shown Stacey Simmons' episode about Memories some love. So wonderful to hear from all of you. And this week, I'm going to sum up your responses by sharing Daryl Evans' answer to my question about what he liked most about this episode. One takeaway, OMG, Lisa. Everything related to our judgment of memories and the acceptance of our version of the events. Daryl, your answer made my day. And listeners, if you haven't reached out to the show yet, you can make my day too by texting the show if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or leaving a comment on YouTube. I would love to hear from you. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I couldn't do this podcast without your support. If you love this episode, here are 3 simple ways that you can keep this show thriving. 1, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. 2, leave a 5-star review so others can find the show. 3, join my engaged, dynamic community by signing up for the Writing Your Resilience newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of Ditch Your Inner Critic, 5 tools to transform self-doubt into self-support. Until next time, remember that your story matters. As you write and connect with the truest, most authentic version, you become not just the writer, but the person you're meant to be. And that, my friends, is the real freedom writing can offer.